If you reject the American, then the State Department of Labor follows up with the applicant and investigates if it's fair or not. They're united on doing nothing. If you're an employer who's willing to look the other way, you might hire illegally. Our goal should be for our immigration system to meet what that natural demand is, the demands of American families, the demands of employers, the demands of anybody who wants to sponsor someone and can afford to support them.
It's interesting because if we start with the demands of people who want to be here, this isn't the first time I've heard the word demands, but it sounds harsh, but it's not meant in that way. I'm starting to learn that in the vernacular. But then you get to the demands of the employer. So really, you're talking about an understanding of what are the needs of the nation and how they might match up with those who want to fulfill those needs. And so that is a different way of looking at the system, because right now we hear so many people discuss the idea of the border is really about being humanitarian. And you're offering a different look at it. Is your look considered less humanitarian?
I don't think so. You can have a system in place, and this is really how America used to operate, where people could come here if they have a sponsor. That sponsor, it can be a business, as we've discussed before, it can be a family, or it could be a church. Really, what it should be is uh, people using their natural ties to bring people over. As long as they can afford it, they can pool their resources and afford it, have them go through the background checks. We don't need caps from the government, but just demand from the people. That should be ebbing and flowing every year. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. Whatever it is, though, it should match the demands of people.
What are the real demands of employers in the United States that makes the need for immigrant labor so instrumental?
Last year, there were 300,000 available agricultural jobs that were seasonal. Of those, roughly 300 Americans applied for those jobs. A lot of people like to say that it's because Americans don't want to do those jobs, and immigrants are only willing to do those jobs. But it's a lot more complicated than that. It's also about where people are willing to live and who's willing to relocate to a more remote area, an area with declining population, to be able to fill those roles. And immigrants by definition are naturally mobile, and they're going to move to places where they have not built roots, because by definition they're leaving their roots behind and moving somewhere else to work. If you're an employer who needs to hire a worker, you have to spend 2 months recruiting an American for the job on the state labor department's website. You need to interview any American that applies. If you reject the American, then the State Department of Labor follows up with the applicant and investigates if it's fair or not. Uh,
Okay.
so I mean, it's a very strenuous process. They have to go through 200 separate rules. They pay roughly $10,000 in fees and legal costs on average to bring over one American worker, or sorry, one foreign worker. So this notion of it being cheap labor, maybe that's true in the illegal immigration sense. But if you're going through the legal process, it's not cheap at all. It's the opposite of cheap.
Is that a process that you advocate for changing, that it is expensive to hire somebody who is not an American citizen?
I think we can make the system less costly and less cumbersome, but keep some of the procedures in place. Maybe we can modernize the way that they recruit Americans. Maybe we can make it a more of a tool that can better draw out Americans who are interested for the job. I don't see anything wrong with that necessarily. I don't necessarily see anything wrong with the requirement that you pay the median wage in the local area that Americans make for the same job in the same location. Some people will disagree with me on that, but I think that it's okay to have those protections. I think it'd be controversial to remove those protections, but we can eliminate all the redundancy behind it. Right now, like I said before, 200 rules, $10,000 in costs, bureaucratic costs, just to tell the Department of Homeland Security, Department of Labor, Department of State, U.S. Department of Agriculture, all the same information over and over again.
Talking to Sam Peake, he does policy on immigration for Americans for Prosperity. It doesn't change a reality for the employer. If they cannot get the American who they would rather have because it would be easier to do, and actually easier, never mind cost wise easier, They still need the work done. And so when you talk about 300,000 openings, but only 300 applicants, that's 299,700 jobs that are still needed. How many of those were filled, if you happen to have that number? And what is the obstacle to moving down this path, this fixing the regulatory path to making this easier to do?
It's unclear how many of those ended up getting filled. A lot of them were able to use the H-2A program. That's the visa for farm workers. If they're not able to use those programs, though, they will do other things. They'll stop growing a kind of crop that requires hands, and they will resort to mechanization. So, like apples might be harder, asparagus might be harder to grow. You might just stop growing that crop altogether and do a crop that you can easily mechanize. Or if you're just a small farmer, you may forego an essential irrigation project, or you may plow less acreage altogether. You may just go out of business. If you're a large farmer, you just may increase the costs. So there are a lot of ways to do it if these jobs don't get filled, but none of it is ideal. If you're an employer who's willing to look the other way, you might hire illegally. If you make our immigration system so inaccessible for these farmers, it's only the unscrupulous employers who get the labor they need.
What's the impediment? Who stands in your way, Democrats or Republicans?
Both. I mean, here's the thing about
wow, you said that quick, man. That was like right in there.
Here's the thing about immigration. You can be bipartisan in favor of immigration reform. You can acknowledge we have a labor shortage, a border that is not secure, and we have record levels of crossings, and we continue to break new records, it's seemingly by the month. But you also have this bipartisan cabal of people from the other side. They may seem like they're opposed. They're united on doing nothing. And they're bipartisan, even though they're pretending to be hyper-partisan. They're actually working together to make sure that nothing changes.
What's the win? If nothing changes, what is the win policy-wise or politically?
They get to keep using this as a cudgel, but something's going to give, because we have so many communities across the country where immigrants are. I mean, they're a vital part of the workforce. They're a vital part of the community, even. Once you have enough people whose lives are disrupted because nothing has changed, you're going to get backlash. Farmers, landscapers, these people, they are very busy. They have businesses to run. Their voices aren't being heard right now because they're normal, ordinary people working beyond 9 to 5. They're going. Eventually, I do think there's going to be hell to pay if we don't get this done.
Sam Peak, policy work on immigration at AmericansForProsperity.org. I appreciate you taking the time.